Glück. Part 1. A world beneath the surface. Opening and life in the pond. At first light, the pond appears almost motionless. A thin layer of mist rests above the water. Lotus leaves rise quietly from the surface. Glück. While reeds along the shoreline move with the gentlest breath of wind. From a distance, this may seem like an empty and peaceful place, but beneath the surface, an entire community is already awake. Glück. Tiny fish move between submerged stems. Freshwater shrimp search the mud for fragments of organic matter. Tadpoles feed among algae, while aquatic insects patrol the narrow spaces between roots and shadows. Every movement sends vibrations through the water. Every shadow may signal food, shelter, or danger. This is not simply a pond, it is a living system. Sunlight provides energy for algae and aquatic plants. Glück's plants produce food, shelter, and oxygen. Small animals feed on them, while larger creatures feed on those animals. Energy moves through the pond in many directions. Nothing exists alone. Glück. Among the submerged vegetation lives one of the pond's most capable predators, the giant water bug. Its body is broad and flattened, allowing it to pass easily beneath leaves and through narrow gaps between plants. Glück. Its brown color closely resembles wet vegetation, old leaves, and dark mud. This is not decoration, it is camouflage. By remaining still, the insect becomes difficult to distinguish from its surroundings. Glück. Instead of chasing prey through open water, it often waits close to a stem, a stone, or a floating leaf. Its front legs are built for grasping. They fold like powerful hooks and can close around a passing fish. Glück. Shrimp, tadpole, or insect larvae within an instant, but even this specialized hunter does not control the pond. Its success depends entirely on the conditions around it. Without aquatic plants, Glück, there would be fewer places to hide. Without small fish, tadpoles, and insects, there would be less food. Without stable water, the entire habitat could disappear. The giant water bug is therefore not separate from the ecosystem. Glück. It is produced by it. Its shape, behavior, and hunting strategy have developed in response to the pond's physical structure. The dense vegetation favors patience. Cloudy water favors sensitivity to vibration. Glück. Limited oxygen near the bottom requires regular journeys to the surface. Although it lives underwater, the insect breathes atmospheric air. It must periodically rise and position the tip of its abdomen near the surface. Glück there. Air enters its respiratory system before the insect returns below. This simple movement reveals an important truth. Even a highly adapted aquatic predator remains connected to the world above the water. Glück. The pond is divided into layers, each with different conditions. Near the surface, light is stronger and oxygen is more available. In the middle, fish and aquatic insects move among stems and leaves. Glück. At the bottom, decaying material provides nutrients for microorganisms, snails, shrimp, and other small consumers. The giant water bug moves through all these layers. It may rest beneath a floating leaf. Glück. Hunt among submerged plants or descend toward the mud to avoid disturbance. Its life is shaped by light, temperature, water depth, and the movements of other animals during the day. Glück. It often remains concealed. As the light softens, activity may increase. The pond becomes a field of information. A ripple may be caused by falling rain. The trembling stem may reveal a struggling insect. Glück. A sudden pressure wave may signal a fish moving through the vegetation. To survive here, an animal must separate useful information from background noise. The giant water bug does this not through intelligence in the human sense, Glück, but through highly refined sensory adaptations. Its body detects changes in the water, its eyes register movement, its legs remain ready to react. Stillness is not inactivity, preparation. And yet, most moments in the pond do not end in attack. Predators spend much of their lives waiting, hiding, breathing, and conserving energy. This is one of nature's most important realities. Glück. Survival is rarely a continuous battle. It is a long process of balance. The balance between movement and stillness, between feeding and avoiding danger, between using energy and preserving it. Glück. The giant water bug is only one participant in this process. Around it, plants grow, insects emerge, fish reproduce, and organic matter returns slowly to the mud. The pond may look quiet, but life is moving everywhere. Path to a pond that never stands still. Change, adaptation, and environmental pressure. A pond is never truly permanent. Even when its shoreline appears unchanged, the conditions within it shift from hour to hour. Glück. Morning sunlight warms the shallow water. By midday, temperature and oxygen levels may be different from those at dawn. Wind pushes floating plants toward one side of the pond. Glück. Rain dilutes the water, disturbs the surface and carries fresh material from the surrounding land. Then, during dry weather, evaporation slowly lowers the water level. These changes affect every organism. Glück. Aquatic plants respond to light and temperature. Algae can increase rapidly when nutrients are abundant. Lotus leaves grow, spread across the surface, then age, weaken and decay. Glück. The shape of the habitat changes with them. A dense patch of plants may provide shelter one week and disappear the next. An open channel of water may become blocked by floating vegetation. Glück. A muddy bank may be submerged after rain, then exposed again during a dry period. For a predator that depends on ambush, these changes matter. The giant water bug cannot hunt effectively everywhere. Glück. It needs structures from which to hide, deep enough to move, but shallow enough for prey to remain concentrated. It needs access to the surface for breathing, and it needs a reliable supply of smaller animals. Glück. When fish fry are abundant, they may become an important source of food. During another period, tadpoles, shrimp or insect larvae may dominate. The predator must adjust. Glück. This flexibility is one reason giant water bugs can survive in many kinds of freshwater habitat, including ponds, marshes, slow streams, irrigation channels, and flooded fields. Glück, but adaptation has limits. If the water becomes too shallow, temperature can rise rapidly. If oxygen conditions worsen, some prey species may leave or die. If vegetation disappears. Glück. Ambush sites become scarce. If pollution enters the pond, the effects may spread through the entire food web. A change at one level rarely remains isolated. Consider the plants. Glück. They are more than background scenery. They stabilize sediment, provide oxygen during photosynthesis, and create surfaces on which algae and microorganisms grow. These microorganisms feed small invertebrates. Glück. Those invertebrates support fish, amphibians, and predatory insects. Remove enough vegetation and the structure of the whole community begins to weaken. The same is true of water level. Glück. A falling water level reduces the pond's total living space. Animals become concentrated into smaller areas. At first, this may benefit predators by bringing prey closer together. Glück. But if the decline continues, the advantage disappears. The water becomes warmer, shelter becomes limited, competition increases. Eventually, the habitat may no longer support the same number of species. Glück. This is why environmental change is not simply a visual difference, it is an ecological pressure. At the beginning of the season, the pond may hold fresh lotus leaves, thick submerged plants, and abundant shallow water life. Glück. Later, the same pond may reveal yellowing leaves, exposed mud and thinner vegetation. The change is gradual. There may be no single dramatic moment, yet every organism experiences it. Glück for the giant water bug. Survival depends on reading these changes through its body. It does not measure temperature or water depth, but its behavior responds to them when prey becomes scarce. Glück. It must search more widely. When shelter is reduced, it becomes more exposed. When the pond begins to fail, remaining still may no longer be enough. Then, a very different adaptation becomes important. Glück. Beneath the hardened wing covers are functional wings. The insect that spends much of its life underwater is also capable of flight. This ability changes the meaning of the pond. Glück. The pond is not a prison. It is one temporary habitat within a wider landscape. At night, especially when conditions encourage movement, adult giant water bugs may leave the water and fly in search of another wetland. Glück. This journey is risky. On land and in the air, the insect loses the protection provided by water and vegetation. It may encounter predators, dry surfaces, strong wind, or artificial lights that confuse its direction. Glück. But remaining in a shrinking pond may be even more dangerous. The decision is not conscious. It is driven by inherited behavior shaped over countless generations. Glück. Individuals that could leave unsuitable water had a greater chance of finding new habitat, surviving and reproducing. Over time, mobility became part of the species' ecological strategy. Glück. The pond changes, the insect responds. This relationship between environmental pressure and adaptation is one of the central forces of evolution. Nature does not preserve organisms by keeping their world unchanged. Glück, it favors those that can survive change. Glück. Part 3. Beyond a single pond. Flight, dispersal and a connected wetland. After sunset, the wetland enters a different phase. The air cools. Day-active insects become quiet, while nocturnal species begin to move. Glück for the giant water bug. Darkness can offer an opportunity. Hidden beneath its hardened forewings is a second pair of wings designed for flight. The transformation is remarkable. An animal that appeared heavy and specialized for underwater life can rise from the pond and travel across land. Its destination may be another pond, a flooded field, a marsh. Glück. An irrigation channel or a temporary pool created by recent rain. These habitats may look separate from above. Ecologically, they are connected. A wetland landscape is not one continuous body of water. Glück. It is often a network of small aquatic islands. Each one changes at a different rate. One pond may be drying, another may be filling. A rice field may hold water for only part of the year. Glück. A roadside ditch may briefly support insects, tadpoles and small fish after heavy rain. Flying animals connect these isolated places. By moving between them, the giant water bug does more than save itself. Glück. It carries genes from one population to another. This movement helps prevent small groups from becoming completely isolated. It also allows the species to recolonize habitats where local populations have disappeared. Glück. In ecology, this is known as dispersal. Dispersal is essential for many freshwater insects because ponds can be temporary. Water may vanish during drought, floods may wash animals away. Glück. Vegetation may be removed, chemical conditions may change. A species that depends on only one small pond faces a high risk of local extinction, but a species that can move across the landscape has more options. Glück. The success of that movement, however, depends on distance. If ponds, marshes and flooded fields remain relatively close, insects can travel between them. If wetlands are destroyed or separated by large dry areas, Glück. Roads and urban development, the journey becomes more difficult. The loss of one pond may therefore affect more than the animals living inside it. It may also remove an important stepping stone between other habitats. Glück. This is why wetland conservation cannot focus only on large lakes and famous nature reserves. Small ponds matter, temporary pools matter, vegetated ditches and marsh edges matter. Glück. Together they form pathways through which aquatic life can spread. When the giant water bug arrives at a new pond, it must first assess the habitat through instinctive behavior. Glück. Is the water deep enough? Are there plants or submerged structures? Is prey present? Can the insect reach the surface safely? Is the pond likely to remain long enough for feeding and reproduction? Glück. Many arrivals will not lead to permanent settlement. Some ponds are too exposed, some contain too little food, others may already hold strong competitors or larger predators, but when conditions are suitable, Glück, a new stage begins. The insect returns to the water. Its wings are folded away. Once again, it becomes a submerged hunter. This transition links two very different worlds. Flight allows movement across the landscape. Glück. Aquatic adaptations allow survival within the pond. Neither ability is sufficient alone. The insect needs both. In suitable habitat, feeding resumes, adults may find mates depending on the species. Glück. Eggs may be placed on vegetation above the water or carried and protected by the male. This parental care is especially striking. In some giant water bugs, the female attaches eggs directly to the male S-back. Glück. He then carries them, ventilates them, and helps maintain the conditions needed for development. In others, eggs are laid on stems above the surface, where adults may remain nearby. Glück. These behaviors demonstrate that survival is not only about catching prey. It is also about ensuring the next generation has the best possible chance to hatch when young nymphs emerge. Glück. They resemble smaller versions of the adults, but without fully developed wings. They must hunt, grow, and shed their outer skeleton several times. Each stage carries risk. The young may become prey to fish. Glück. Frogs, birds, larger insects, or even other predatory bugs. Only some will reach adulthood. Those that do will inherit the same combination of traits that brought their parents through changing ponds. Glück. Uncertain food supplies and dangerous journeys through the night. The cycle continues. Egg, nymph, adult, flight, new water, a new generation. What appears to be the story of one insect is therefore part of a much larger process. Glück. Wetlands are connected by movement, populations are linked by dispersal. And life continues because organisms are able to leave one world and begin again in another. Glück. Part 4, the hidden balance of nature. Food web, ecological roles, and final reflection. In the new pond, life begins to organize itself around familiar relationships. Sunlight reaches the water. Glück. Plants and algae capture its energy. Small animals feed on this living material. Predators feed on them. Dead leaves, waste, and animal remains are broken down by bacteria, fungi, and detritivores. Glück. Nutrients return to the water and sediment. Then plants use them again. This is not a simple chain, it is a web. A tadpole may feed on algae, but it may also consume decaying plant material. Glück. A small fish may eat insects, then become prey for a bird, snake, or larger aquatic predator. A dragonfly larva may hunt other insects underwater before emerging as an adult that captures mosquitoes in the air. Glück. The giant water bug is woven into this network. It consumes fish, tadpoles, shrimp, and aquatic insects, but it can also be eaten by birds, fish, frogs, reptiles, or other predators. Glück. It is both hunter and potential prey. This prevents us from describing the ecosystem as a simple hierarchy. There is no permanent ruler of the pond. Power changes with size, life stage. Glück. Location and circumstance. A giant water bug may overpower a small fish beneath a lotus leaf in open water. A larger fish may attack the bug near the shoreline. A bird may catch either of them. Glück. Every advantage is conditional. Predators such as the giant water bug can influence the number and behavior of smaller animals. By removing some prey, they may prevent a single species from becoming overwhelmingly abundant. Glück. But their effect depends on many other factors, including food supply, vegetation, water quality, and the presence of competing predators. Ecological balance is therefore not a perfectly fixed state. Glück. It does not mean that every population remains unchanged. Numbers rise and fall. Species appear and disappear with the seasons. Young animals are born, others die, plants spread. Glück. Then decay. Water arrives, then retreats. Balance is the ability of the system to continue functioning through these changes. At the beginning of our journey, the pond was filled with fresh green leaves. Glück. The water level was higher. Aquatic vegetation covered more of the shallow areas. Morning light gave the habitat an atmosphere of growth and abundance. Now, the same view tells a different story. Glück, the water has fallen. Some lotus leaves have turned yellow. Submerged plants are thinner. Mud is exposed along the shoreline. The angle and color of the light have changed. Nothing remains exactly as it was. Glück. This contrast is not merely cinematic, it is evidence the pond has passed through time. Water has evaporated or drained away. Plants have aged, animals have moved, reproduced. Glück. Fed and died. Nutrients have been transferred from one body to another and returned to the sediment. The landscape itself has recorded the season. For the giant water bug, these changes may mean adapting. Glück. Hiding deeper, searching farther, or leaving completely. For fish and tadpoles, they may mean reduced space and greater competition. For birds, the shallower water may briefly make prey easier to reach. Glück. The same environmental change creates different consequences for different species. This is why ecosystems cannot be understood by observing only one animal. The pond must be seen as a whole. Glück. The plants are connected to the insects. The insects are connected to the fish. The fish are connected to the birds. Predators, prey, decomposers, and producers are joined by the movement of energy and nutrients. Glück. Even the surrounding land matters. Rainfall, soil, farming, vegetation, and human activity can all influence what happens in the water. Protecting a wetland, therefore, means protecting relationships. Glück. Clean water alone is not enough if all the vegetation is removed. Plants alone are not enough if the pond is isolated from every other habitat. A single protected species cannot survive indefinitely if the wider food web collapses. Glück. Conservation succeeds when the system remains connected, diverse, and capable of renewal. The giant water bug may attract our attention because of its powerful legs, concealed wings and extraordinary hunting behavior. Glück. But its deeper importance lies elsewhere. Its presence can tell us that the pond still supports prey, shelter, and functioning ecological relationships. It is not proof that the habitat is perfect. Glück. But it is part of the evidence that life remains active beneath the surface. As the camera rises, the individual insect becomes almost impossible to see. The lotus leaves become small patches of green. Glück. The reeds merge into the shoreline. The entire pond becomes one feature within a much larger wetland. From this distance, no single species dominates the image. And that is the final lesson. Glück. Nature is not maintained by one powerful animal. It is maintained by countless interactions, most of which pass unnoticed. A fish disturbing the water, a bee visiting a flower. Glück. A snail breaking down a dead leaf, a dragonfly catching an insect, a predator waiting silently beneath the surface. Each action is small. Together they create a living ecosystem. Glück. The pond at the end of the story is not the pond we saw at the beginning. The water has changed. The leaves have changed. The light has changed. The animals have changed. Everything is moving through time. Glück, and yet life continues. Not because nature remains the same, but because nature is able to change.